Hello, welcome in. My name is Carter Gowan. This is the TTRPG book club, and if you haven't seen the book club before, we've got all our previous episodes up on YouTube. It is just essentially me going through a new book in my collection, a series, or something which is in my TTRPG collection, and just exploring it, not going through a huge detail, but giving you the core ideas and concepts of what the game is, what the core processes are as well, to let you just jump in quite easily, and the feel of it, as well as some useful and some innovative things that some systems have. Because most systems these days have something innovative, something new, something very interesting. As always, we have Syrinscape in the background for audio. I'm just in the classic adventure for Syrinscape because we are looking at a very, very classic adventure story. We are looking at the One Ring starter set. So the One Ring starter set just came out of Kickstarter. I believe it's out live now. The One Ring is essentially based, I think this is the second edition, it is based off the Lord of the Rings, like Lord of the Rings stories and Lord of the Rings worlds, i.e. Tolkien. And we're looking specifically at the starter set. I do have the actual core rules here. There's too much to go through in this, so I'm not going to go into this. We're just going to have a look at the real basics, because I find it's much easier to actually look into a starter set and to jump into a starter set than jumping into a full rule system of full core rules. I like the starter sets because it dumbs down the rules just a little bit. It gives you a better idea of where you want to, like, how the game works without going into too much detail. So a few things that I want to talk about as well for this starter set is the amount of things in the starter set. So you get cards, which I'm not really a big fan of, but these are like item cards and bits and pieces. I don't really find them really interesting at all, but you do get them. You get a dice set. So the dice set, you might notice, is a bit different from normal. We'll get into how the rolls work, but you use D6s and D12s, and these are specially marked D6s and D12s. You don't need the specially marked ones, they just came with the set. And because I kickstarted and I wanted it, I also got these ones, which is the sour one version of those dice sets as well. But that doesn't come with it. You also get these. These are travel cards. Yes, these are still in the wrap packets. I generally keep my physical copy stuff in the wrap packets and whatnot. These are something different. These are quite unique. And this is something I want to speak about in the review because they're kind of interesting. And I can't recall seeing anything close to that in previous game systems. So we get about 8 characters, and the character sheet's actually pretty cool. So the character sheets are really simple, very simplistic. As you might notice, they're very dotted. So we'll talk about how, kind of what the system works with that. And they've got a really, really simple bio on the back. They're only 1 page each, and there's about 8 character sheets there. You get I believe, 28 page core rules, or basic core rules. Really simple to pick up. Well, simple to skim. And it's not just the rules, but also gives you the ideas of like kind of how a play session works and examples there, because this is set for people that are starting adventuring from scratch. Now, it has a small adventure book. Again, it's only about that 28, 30 pages worth. The adventures are very, very simple and very, very tied into the setting. And they're very cutesy and they're very tied into the setting, and they're really, really cool. Now, you might have a guess what the setting is because you saw the character sheets, but the setting for the starter sheet, for the starter book, is the Shire. Sorry, this is green. I use a green screen, so it's kind of a bit weird in colour. Now, that's actually the biggest book out of the lot. So out of all of them, this is a 52-page book compared to the 28 and 30 page of the other two. So there's a lot of detailed information here just on the Shire itself, because that is where you're adventuring, at least initially. You also get a beautiful, and I do mean beautiful, map. I'm going to try to pull this out. A very beautiful map there, and it's double-sided. Sorry, it's green. Green screens, that's an issue. But yes, a really gorgeous map as well. And that's what comes in the box. Also, what I noticed in the box too, which you don't always get in boxes, and I want to point this out because you don't usually get it into boxes. Ugh. Again, this is green, sorry, but there's also a map on the inside of the bottom of the box, and a Quick Rules GM reference. So this is also your GM screen essentially, which is pretty cool. I like that. I like having a reference screen inside the box. It's very utilitarian. I don't know why a lot of, especially quick starter games, don't have quick reference stuff. I think that's the big failing in a lot of games, is not having quick reference stuff, especially for something like a starter set. Now, the rules, let's go to the other screen. We'll have a look at a few things, and we'll start with the other stuff. Now, so I just wanted a couple of caveats. Yes, I backed it. I backed this, but I'm not a how can I put this? I backed the One Ring when it came out on Kickstarter, but I'm not a Tolkien fanatic. I'm not a big Tolkien fan, but I backed it because I think it's a really cool product, and I backed it because Tolkien is also, like, this is the original fantasy setting, which a lot of other settings have stolen off. If you're familiar with orcs in your games, in your normal fantasy settings, orcs are not mythical creatures. Orcs were Tolkien. Orcs were stolen from Tolkien, or borrowed from Tolkien. Goblins are mythical creatures. Orcs were not. So a lot of stuff have been taken from Tolkien. Tolkien, brilliant person, brilliant writer, and brilliant linguist. He made the languages himself. Anyway, let's get into it. There's a lot of fanboy stuff that you can actually... I talked about this product with a fanboy, a super fan, I should say, of the Tolkien universe, and they couldn't recognize just from simple things like, oh yeah, that's Tolkien, oh yeah, that's this, because they've really used big fans of the source material to recreate what they've got. So this is not something that's like outside the realms of Tolkien universe. This is people that love the Tolkien universe that have recreated it. So I just want to point that out there. It's you don't always get that, but this really rings true. Okay, so let's have a look at the first book. So sorry about the dropping things. That happens. So the rules book is what we're going to be looking at today. The rules book, again, is only about 28 pages. It's quite small. Generally, if you get into about 40 to 50 pages for a core rules book in a starter set, that's way above what you need. 20 to 30 pages is essentially the core, and this has a lot of stuff in there too. So we're just going to move down a few things. There's a prologue, but there's no actual... I can't thing at the front of the book. I can't even think what it means. Yes, there's no listing at the front of the book to show what everything is, and my brain is just stopped. So we're starting in the Shire, and it goes into a lot of bits about the Shire. It goes into just little bits and pieces here. Instead of a GM, they're called a Lawmaster here, and there's also the structure of the game, which is pretty good. Like they actually, you can pause it and read this if you need to. But it goes into very similar things which you would see in most games. It is a GM or Lawmaster driven game. Players react to GM for the most part. The role system is kind of what I want to talk about the most today. The role system, if you've seen some of my other TTRPG book clubs, I usually break the core rules right down to the very simplest of role systems, like dice plus mod versus DC. You see that in Pathfinder, you see that in Dungeons and Dragons, you see that in BattleTech. It's very common across the board. Stuff like dice pool. You roll as many dice as the number in your skill. Get X amount of successes. You see that in Vampire the Masquerade and Shadowrun and a few others. So that's dice pool system. This is kind of a combination of both, where you have a D12, you're always rolling. You always roll a D12. The amount that you roll of D6s is how much you have in your skill. And you're not trying to get a 6 or a 5 on those D6s, you're adding to the D12. So it's almost a dice pool, but it's kind of not a dice pool at the same time. So it's kind of a hybrid of the two. Now, then you're just rolling against a DC. Now, the DC isn't governed by the Lawmaster, or GM. The DC is actually governed by your abilities, which I think is also a nice little innovation there. So if you have 5 in your ability, if you have, say, 5 in your skill, in your attribute, you'll have 15 target number or DC. So it's actually 20 minus your ability, and that's your target number for your skills. So it kind of works where it's also almost a hybrid of the D100 system where you're also kind of rolling against it yourself. So if you have very low in your attribute, then you're self-penalizing for the skills that run off that attribute, because that is your target numbers. Your target numbers are going to be higher. Instead of like not having as much ability to use them, it's just going to be harder to actually get those target numbers. It's a different way of looking at the same problem, and I think it's really nice to see. That's my opinion. I think it's really nice to see a nice innovation. I don't like how a lot of games like Pathfinder 2 and especially Pathfinder 1, which is based off the Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 and 3rd edition, where you have what would be called difficulty creep or target number creep, DC creep. So as you go up levels, the same things that, like picking a lock or listening for things or whatnot, are getting harder and harder and harder because your skills are so high that the numbers go so high. Sorry, that was a phone call, probably not important. Total professional here. So that DC creep is a absolute thing. We played a Dungeons & Dragons game on the channel. We've played many on the channel. We've got 2 current Pathfinder 2 games. We've had a Pathfinder 1 game, and we see that DC creep all over the place. It's a real thing in those types of games. So this actually removes that totally. You don't have DC creep. Whoop. That's a bit of a weird one. Hold on. There we go. That's really weird. You don't see those DC creeps in things like Call of Cthulhu because your DC is based off your own stats. And that's the kind of thing we have here. Like in Call of Cthulhu, your DC creep, like your DC is your skill itself. In this, it's based off your ability, not your skill. So you kind of, again, self-limiting yourself when it comes to your skills. When it comes to your abilities and whatnot. So I like that. I think it's pretty cool. I would love to see it in action. So as I mentioned, you roll a D12. So 1D12, and you always roll 1D12 for the most part. There's always going to be exceptions. And then you roll as many D6s as your ticks in your skill. So if you've got 3 in your skill, you roll 3 D6s plus your D12. You add all that up, and that's essentially against your own target number. Now, I love that idea. I think it's a really cool system. I love that core. This is what I don't like. The exceptions. Now, firstly, the D12s have, I'm just going to scroll down to the next one, and the D12s have a symbol on the 12, a rune on the 12, which is Gandalf's rune, which means it's an automatic success. Even if you fail the roll, it's an automatic success. Yay. They also have an eye on the room. An eye on the room accounts as 0. It doesn't mean an automatic failure. You can still pass on the d6s. So this is called the feat dice. The d12 is called your feat dice. So on the 12 is an automatic success. On the 1 is a 0. So you can still win on the 0, on the Sauron eye, by using the other dice, by successes on the other dice. So the other dice are called the success dice. Those are a bit weird too. This is what I mean, there's a lot of exception. Like, I don't like all the exceptions to this. So these ones have an outline to the 1, 2, and 3, and the 4, 5, and 6 are solid. There's a reason for that. The 6 also has another rune, the Elvis numeral 1. I don't know why it's the 1, but essentially it's almost a stylized T, and that's a success. So that's like the level of success. So if you roll one of those in your roll, then it's a really bigger success. It's a degree of success type of thing. So over the top success. So that's another way of doing things. And as I mentioned, the target numbers are self-limiting. There's more. You can repeat a roll, just like in the Call of Cthulhu game. And like in a Call of Cthulhu game, you have to approach the roll with a different skill. I'm okay with that. I actually don't mind that at all. I like that you have to try to come back with it with a different time. There also, again, is a consequence, which again I like. If you want to push something, which is what Call of Cthulhu calls it, there's a consequence. So, degrees of success. The I rune is success, yay. The T rune is added successes, extraordinary successes, essentially, and it's just, yay. I don't see why you need that. I really don't see why you need that. And these are the things which just add more complications to a really cool core simple. You don't need anything more than a core simple system. Just let the GM or the lore master play with that. Let the players play with that. You don't need to implement it, is what I'm kind of saying. Then there's more modifiers and more changes to things. Favoured rolls. You might have a specific skill affinity, which means that when you're rolling this, you are favoured, which means you roll another d12. I said those exceptions. Another d12, and you take the best. Similar to inspiration, where you roll twice and get the best. There's ill-favoured rolls. Guess what happens there? You roll the 2d12 and take the worst. Then there's bonus dice. So see what I mean by the issues with, like, there's exceptions to it. So bonus dice, like, say if you have a specific equipment which is perfect for you, or if the situation is just perfect for you, you can get multiple success dice as bonus dice to roll. You can spend your hope. Hope is a limited resource, similar to, like, not similar to luck, but similar to edge in the 5th edition and 4th edition of Shadowrun, where you can spend your hope in those editions. It was called edge, to roll an extra dice. You can only roll one at a time, but you don't always have to roll one at a time, because sometimes you can also be inspired, which means you can roll 2 hope dice at a time instead of 1. As in, your hope dice that you spend is equal to 2 dice. See my issues coming? Like, there's more and more and more and more complications to a really simply good system. Then there's penalty dice. I'm not even going to go into them. I'm not. I'm not going to go into the penalty dice because, again, it's more complications on something which was a simple system. I think, personally speaking, personally speaking, I would, if I was to run this, I would remove half of this. I would remove the runes. So this is my personal thinking here, as just a summing up of the core system, in my opinion of the core system. I would remove the Gandalf rune and the Eye of Sauron rune and the Elven rune as well, and just throw them all away. Success is a success. Done. You don't need it. You really don't need all the other bits and pieces. You just don't. You don't need all that bits and pieces. The favoured runes and ill-favoured runes, again, I don't think you need them. Hope dice I would keep. But maybe the bonus dice and penalty dice I would keep. But the rune stuff I would just throw out. That's me personally speaking. I would just absolutely throw it out. Don't need it, don't care. You really don't need that type of stuff. Just narrate what's happening and describe. Have the players describe what's happening. I'm big into player descriptions these days. But, okay. So, there's other stuff as well. So there's also conditions. Now, this being only the basics, we don't really go into dying and whatnot. This is the starter set. Doesn't really even take on the role of like character death, so it's very simplistic in that. But you do have Riri, and I like this where a character. Riri is the resistance of the player heroes. The resistance of the player heroes is represented in the game in play game terms by their endurance score. Heroes can lose their endurance in many ways when their endurance drops to a level equal to or lower than their load score, as in what they're carrying. They become weary. When a weary hero is making rolls, the success dice that comes up showing 1, 2, or 3, the ones which are like the hollow numbers, they're counted as 0 instead of the number. So again, I can see that being like, these are systems, like they're essentially subsystems to the core, which are just like complications to the core system, which I don't think are needed. But in this case, this is also talking about hit points as well. So your wounded score, like when your endurance is also dropped is essentially your hit points. So when your endurance, your hit points drops below your load, then you struggle more. But they've got a really simple core, and they're just finding more ways to put complications on that simple and really nice mechanic. Yeah. So when you have to have a table like this one here, then for me I would say game designers, if you need a table to explain things, you're not doing it right, or you've done something wrong along the process. And so yeah, they've had to have a table. And they've got like 7 steps here for the dice rolls. 7 steps. You shouldn't need 7 steps for a dice roll. That you should not need 7 steps. You want to try to get it down to 4 if you can. Like, you really want to try to get it down to as little as possible. That's why I love VTTs, virtual tabletop systems, because they take a lot of that load. You're essentially bringing it down to maybe 3, like 2 to 3 on a lot of the VTTs, of like how many steps you need. So with the characters, you don't have your normal or more commonly used 6 stats, you've only got 3. There's not a tri-stat system, but you still only have 3. Tri-stat is a totally different thing, as far as I know. So you have strength, you have heart, you have wits. So strength is physical endurance, etc., etc. Heart is your capacity for emotional, that type of stuff. Emotion, passion, and wits is, well, your ability to outsmart and think through things and being wise, etc. There is a skill which I won't usually go into skills, but there is a skill I want to find. We don't need to go through combat. I was going to go to combat in a moment. Not courtesy. Riddle. Riddle is a skill, and I like it. Riddle, owing its name to the ancient game of the riddle skill, represents the ability to draw conclusions from seemingly unconnected scraps of information by deduction, reasoning, and intuition. Adventurers also rely on riddle whenever they are forced to talk about a subject they prefer to conceal part of what they know. For example, to tell something about themselves without revealing their actual identity. As an accepted custom among cultures, speaking in riddles is usually allowed among strangers meeting for the first time and wanting to speak guardedly. This skill is also used to gain helpful insight from spoken and written riddle. I like it. It's essentially a deception skill. It's a deception and also investigation at the same time skill. What a cool idea. Like, I think it's just a really cool idea to have that as a actual skill. There's 18 skills. So you've got a good mixture of skills, but it's also like not too much like, say, a Call of Cthulhu where you've just got so much it's hard to find them all. But you are covered along everything you might need to go to. We're going to go through. I love some of this artwork. The artwork is really good. The other books, I've got so much more artwork. It is really, really, really well done. So we want to go through. I'm just going to skim to the bottom part. There we go. So combats. Combats is different. Combats is very, very, very different. And if used in this more base way, I think it'd be really fun and very simplistic and very fast. One thing a heck of a lot of systems suffer is slow, prolonged combat. I can say that I have done multiple episodes of shows where we've just had one combat for a whole 4-hour block. No. I've had combats back in the old days of my face-to-face group where we would have a combat running for 8 hours in certain systems. But we were also very, very slow role players. We were all very casual. We weren't trying to put on a show. So combat. Opening volleys. If the player heroes and their opponents are separated at a distance at the start at the fight, all combatants are allowed to make ranged attacks before going into close combat. Freaking awesome. I love it. You have then stance cards. That's what these are. So the reflection is kind of a bit of a thing. So you have stance cards. There's 6 of them in this little sachet. And they're actually pretty unique. I've never really seen them in anything else before. They probably could be used, actually probably should be used in games like Battletech in the tabletop side of things. Maybe some more tabletop war gaming stuff. But these are actually pretty cool for a very simplistic version of combat. So the stance cards is essentially, you put this down of where you are, like what stance your character is. And you have 4 distinct stances. You have open, which you got close combat open. You've got close combat forward, close combat defense, and close combat rearward. So rearward we'll look at first. Rearward is you are at the back. You can only use ranged attacks. You are at the back. Open close combat. You have no disadvantages or advantages. When you are in close combat, all opponents, like you choose your opponents choose you, and it's a stacks on. People will engage in combat, in close combat, all fight each other. There's no real tactical play, so to speak. I find some games these days are just extreme tactical play. They're almost a tabletop war game with one character with a lot of different abilities. And I find that very boring. And I won't say which one specifically I don't like, which is really that. But anyway, so that's open combat. You can have close combat forward, where your attack rolls gain 1 extra dice, but all close combat attacks aimed at you gain 1 dice. So it's more of a I'm recklessly attacking style. So I get an extra dice to hit, but my defenses are low, so they also get an extra dice to hit me. So when we're talking about dice, we're talking about a d6 to all those attacks. Defensive. So there's close combat defensive. All close combat attacks aimed at you lose 1 dice. Your attack rolls lose 1 dice for each opponent you are engaging. So that's a bit more... that's a bit harder, because while you can go in defensive and kind of be that tank role, if multiple people stacks on you, your abilities are even more diminished. Whereas the open, you're only losing 1, you're gaining 1, losing 1. For the defensive, they're losing 1, you're losing up like multiples, depending on how many are against you. But that's one side of these. There's also a stance for traveling on the other side of these. So I think that's a really cool innovation. It's a simple, you just flip it to where you are and put it in front of you on your dice. Cool. I would love to probably put it into Roll20 and just have it as a card for each player. I'm this. And they just post it in front of where their names are on the bottom of the screen, and post kind of what their stance is, and we can do that done. I think that'd be awesome. I think it'd work really cool. And in Roll20, you just turn at 90 degrees. Or sorry, turn it, 9 degrees, yeah. That's the one thing I think was a really cool innovation, the stance cards. And the fact that you've got really, really simplistic combat engagement. I'm not going to go through it all. Again, there are exceptions. Exceptions are things which I really dislike, especially on a system which I think is so good in its core. I mean, yes, a lot of games have exceptions. The most popular game is built on exceptions. But this, I think, could have succeeded better on having less exceptions and more simplicity. I don't know how the first edition was. I have no experience on the first edition for this, but I think this could have done better without all these weird complications. So what I want to do is I want to actually show you the character sheets as well. So the character sheets are really simplistic. Really, really simplistic. So you can see your target number up the top here. You can see your endurance and your abilities. Like, everything is really simplistic. Everything is right in front of you. Your skills are laid out per different area. So all the ones on the left are linked to strength, so you know your target number. All the ones in the middle, there's your target number, and etc. And it's just so simple to see what goes where. There's nothing complicated about it at all. And you have, again, that real basic, this is my background, blah, blah, blah. And there's 8 of them. I won't go through them all, but they're really simple. They're really cool. I think that I think that's a really really, really good example of a character sheet. Here's the map, which I tried to show you, but it was green with the green screen. Again, this is a bit cropped, but It's really, really cool. Nice details, and this is where you're adventuring in the starter set. You're adventuring in the Shire itself, which in itself is pretty cool, and which I think is also a really nice starter place. You've also got the big map, which again, really, really cool. Really, really cool art style. In the books, they have a very similar style to the to one like some of the other Free League publishing styles. Symbaroum. They've got a very similar style to Symbaroum. Most likely going to be the same artist because that style is just so similar. But that's pretty much what I want to talk about with the starter set. So we'll go back to that one. There we go. This will be uploaded onto YouTube. Check out all the other stuff on YouTube. Give me a moment, and once I'll stop this, we'll then just free chat. But thank you everyone for coming in for the pre-recorded section of this. Check out all the stuff. Check out the One Ring. Again, I have issues with it. Well, thank you, Small Town Creepy. That's kind of disturbing, but thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Goblin Cave community. We love you. But yeah, so I do have issues with the game system itself. I think it could have succeeded more with less complications. I don't think I think there's far more complicated games out there. So this wouldn't be that hard to run at all. And I really like the setting. I think having the Shire for the starter box, bloody awesome. Great idea. So that's it for the pre-recorded stuff. Check it out, Free League Publishing. Get your own copy. What do you think? If you've played it before, if you played all the previous, any of the previous Lord of the Rings stuff previously. I know at some points they've been really expensive because of the movies and stuff. What did you think of them? What's your opinions? Are you big fans of the genre of the Lord of the Rings franchise? Leave the comments down below on YouTube, and I'm going to end the pre-recorded stream now. So see ya.